it's boring. That's what that expression means. To watch paint dry is boring because nothing happens. And that's the key thing with the watching. In watching, the object has to be in motion. That's why you watch a film, you watch a movie, you watch the children playing. The thing that you're watching moves, right? It's okay, Anna, don't worry. Try and sort it out. I'm in a new environment too. So it's not to do with the person doing the watching, because the difference in volition between looking at and seeing is to do with the subject, but the difference with watching has to do with the object. It's the object that is in motion. So you can't watch something that is static. You always have to watch something that is in motion. How about that?
Fun.
You're getting a language class in the middle of it all while we wait.
Love it. Really.
Oh, well, I'm glad. These are the niggly little differences that at some level are the difference between teachers with training with not because you have to know these things, because see, listen, watch, these words are part of the language, but these words appear in the language every so often. And then I was watching a thing. I have these groups of graduate teachers who want to keep their English up, right? So I tried to find things that they probably have never seen and that are pretty unusual. And I was watching this comedy show that had a sketch on language adults shouldn't use. Nobody over 20 should use, right? In English. Like there is in Spanish. We've talked about buenardo, me la sube, y epicardo, y qué sé yo, qué otras cosas que dicen los adolescentes, ¿no?
Malardo.
Malardo, todos los sardos que se les ocurran. Ricardo, todo el tiempo. Pero hay Insta, esa es otra que usa mucho mi hijo. Está Insta.
Dea.
Sí, pero por ejemplo, arre es antiguo. Es de mi hija, pero no de mi hijo.
Bueno, ahora Leonardo y Malardo ya no se usan. Ya no se pueden usar, ya cayeron en desuso.
Claro.
Sí.
A mí me pasó de decir arre, o sea, no lo planeé, ¿no? Estaba con los chicos en una salida, que estuvimos 3 días en Chapadmalal, decir algo y decir arre al final. Y me dijeron, ay, es la primera vez que escucho arre en contexto de alguien de 30, porque es de tu generación. Me dijeron...
Te dijeron vieja. A los 30 te dijeron vieja.
Claro, pero como que era un uso original de la
vuelve
expresión.
atrás de eso.
Claro, no hay retorno. No, okay. Those terms have a very short shelf life. Shelf life, it comes from the supermarket register, to have a short... Esperen que lo escribo en el cosito. These things are not normally written, but watching paint dry. A short, I'm in a new place and it's odd because the table is a bit taller. There's Mariana. A short shelf life, right? So that comes from the supermarket, right? So for example, I don't know, cucumbers have a shorter shelf life than, I don't know, tinned products, right? For example. Hi, Mariana, how are you? We're talking about supermarkets.
Hi there.
Hi, Mariana.
Really? Yeah. Hi.
Yes.
Have you done your shopping?
No, I haven't done my shopping yet.
Only Mariana?
What?
No. So, Lucas was asking you if you'd done your shopping, and I thought that you might, because we're talking about the supermarket, but I thought there might be a real shopping expedition involved, and he knew something that I didn't know.
No, I was just joking.
Teasing her. Okay. So we were saying that this expression that something has a short shelf life comes from the supermarket, in the sense that certain products can stay on the shelf for less time than other products. Now, when I say that an expression or a word like arre has a short shelf life, what I mean is that it has a short lifespan, if you want to make it formal, in the language, because they're informal words that a group of people, particularly teenagers, use intensively, and usually when they use them all the time, right? And then they go, they're like, I don't know, these flowers that live for one day and then they disappear. You see?
Could the same term be applied to people?
That they have a short
A
shelf
person
life.
can have or a short shelf popularity. Short shelf, can it be applied to?
Okay, well,
these singers that usually are like a seasoned singer.
Well, you may
like
be
Marama, Rombike.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
They last for the summer, and then you forget about them.
Right. Yeah, you could be accused of objectifying them, right? Because you're treating them a bit like an object. You could say that the songs have a short shelf life. They have, it's usually applied to objects rather than to people. Again, you could say,
Estrellas pasajeras.
Claro, her boyfriends have very short shelf life, sort of thing, right?
Okay.
But usually it refers to fashions, that's another thing, another expression, a fad. Fad is something that is a very short trend, something that's in fashion but for a very short time, and it's usually something that's kind of weird, kind of extravagant, kind of strange. It's a fad. It'll pass. It's a fad.
Los emos.
Por ejemplo, claro. Sí. Yeah, that's a sort of thing. But if I were to tell you the expressions, like this all started because Anna was told by her students that she was old when she was 30 because she used arre in context. And yeah. And Lucas was saying that things like buenardo and epicardo, that they are out. They are out because they're gone, and now there's some other things. What did you say?
No me la container.
No me la container.
Nache.
Sí,
Nache, dicen también.
Nache la he oído. No sé muy bien qué significa, pero...
Como algo muy bueno. Lo ponen como un cool, pero sí, no va, creo, yo entendí eso, que va así en ese contexto. O sea, lo puedes meter en cualquier parte en realidad.
Right. Well, the other day I had a student who was able to pinpoint the origins of buenardo to a streamer that my son listens to, Coscu. Bien, Lucas. Lucas sabe de qué estamos hablando. Yo, si no tuviera un hijo adolescente, no tenía la más mínima idea. Y aún así tengo poca idea, pero bueno, ¿qué vamos a hacer, no?
Yes, anyhow, I've not listened to him, so I don't know who he is actually. So I've heard of him and I've seen a photo of him, but nothing more. And that word comes from him. Yeah.
You knew that?
Yeah, that's
You're very knowledgeable, Lucas. Let me share with you, if I can find it, what it was that my student wrote about this, because it was very interesting, because again, it indicated that there was an age divide here. Hang on. He was talking about, being quite liberal with his language acceptance. He said, buenardo was the limit. I first became acquainted with this travesty of a word through some folks I know online who described it as the new Zoomer sensation. Upon further research, I discovered that the word came from a popular internet personality called Kokku, who earns a living by live streaming video games on a platform called Twitch, while also spewing a plethora of buzzwords of his own making, such as de ruta, esa también la dice mi hijo, epicardo, and the now infamous buenardo. At first, I couldn't fathom... esperen que no llegó. No me dejó terminar de copiar porque esta tiene un límite. Okay, so let me just copy it again.
How's that? To avoid spam?
I don't know. Chat must have a limit. I've just learned. You can't put very long things. Anyway, at first I couldn't fathom the thought of any but the youngest of folks uttering such... He's doing this a bit tongue-in-cheek. This is not the way he speaks, right? He's a young man. Anyway, uttering such frivolous words. But then I realized that the ardo abomination was not much different from the YouTuber era buzzwords of my 90s adolescence, with the now fallen out of fashion arre. So I couldn't but feel sympathy for the monstrous ardo suffix. For if my adolescence had just began, I would probably indulge in its use as well. Anyway, now, and then he did reflect on something which is quite true, which is this. Hang on. Less satirical, more true. Again, it doesn't let me copy it all, but let's see. My sympathy for the suffix notwithstanding, I was determined to never utter such a word ever again. But you see, it was not nearly as easy as I originally thought. The problem began when my friends started using it as a joke, a harmless mock on modern trends and the younger generation. As time went by and the jokes the jokes permuted, and I was progressively drawn into prohibit delight of all ardo things, up until the word, once thought to be a joke, became more frequent, less satirical, and more true to its... here it is. To its meaning. And when I finally became aware of the word's corruption of mind and soul, it was all too late for regrets. I had become one of them, a buenardo user no less. Anyway, so this is a bit, I kind of tease the kids with buenardo as well, but then you end up picking it up as well, and it can catch on to other generations too.
Yeah. Sorry, who wrote this?
One of my students at Lenguas Vivas.
Nice reflection.
Yeah, as I said, he did it tongue-in-cheek in the sense that he is using a variety of a form of English that is not the way he would normally speak. He's writing like a pretentious older person as well, right? But yeah, the point he makes about, and he went and he actually found out about the origin of the word, so that's kind of cool, because I confirmed my suspicions. I didn't know it was Costco, and maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was one of his friends, but he popularized it, right? And he, made it stick. Anyway, Denise was supposed to give her presentation today. Yesterday, she sent me an audio saying that she'd been called by one of the schools where she's now working, and she was told that she had to go today to do some of this face-to-face support stuff in the school.
Acompañamiento docente, algo así.
Algo así que yo ya
Yes, she told me something about that.
me estalla la cabeza de tratar de recordar los términos, ya no. Pero bueno, algo así.
Well, those new terms are shelf life.
They have a short shelf life, you think?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I hope so.
Yes.
We don't know. Boletín abierto, eso ya es de antes, venía de antes el boletín abierto. Pero bueno.
TED
Yeah.
Talk. I know TED Talk. Ripio, esta es otra, perdón. Ripio, ¿seguirá existiendo, Lucas? ¿Vos que sabés?
Yes, I think I think it does. It's still used. I don't use it. I don't hear it quite often. No, I don't use it. I don't use it at all. But
For a long time.
Oh, okay.
Perhaps funar would be more the funar. No, funaron. Lo funaron.
Lo funaron.
Yeah,
And
that
what's
would
this?
be funar is much more used with that sense. It's just,
meaning the same.
You kill. It was that person was killed. He was. Also, for example, if someone is going to say something, I don't know, polémico, let's say, you would say, okay, careful, you're going, te van a funar, cuidado. So you are going to receive a lot of criticism and hate
Cuidado
comments.
con derrapar. Derrapar.
Yes.
Es muy antiguo también, ¿no? Derrapar.
Yeah, that one is quite old. Another one perhaps is, it's not that I know a lot of that, but a lot about that.
You know what you could do? And this is an honest suggestion, both to enlighten yourself, but also to get your students to reflect on these things, to get them to do a glossary of the terms they use and explain to people what they mean, right? There's a little, I think I showed it to you, and if I didn't, I'll show it to you now. Yeah, I think that's where we were. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen this little book or if I mentioned it here, maybe.
Yeah.
I mentioned it. Okay, I repeat myself.
No, not you, but I've heard about it.
Right.
I know the book.
Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. It's a very short book, and it's intended for foreigners, right? And it's written in English. It's somewhere in my house. I don't know where it is, but I have it. But it's basically a kind of cultural explanation of some of these terms and how they're used, right? But going back to what we were saying at the beginning, maybe your students could do a blog with all the terms that they use, and maybe they could even include explanations in English. Because if they're intended for foreigners, right?
Could be. Why not?
There's
this other word now I'm remembering, a short version for claro, it would be cla. But you have to stress a cla. That would be another possibility.
¿En Lobos no se usan estas, María Ángeles? María de Los Ángeles?
Yeah, well, yes, we have different terms. For example, for highlighter, we say minote.
El resaltador.
En vez de resaltador, minote. Bueno.
Why? Is it a brand?
No. It's like a big marker. I don't know.
Okay.
So yeah,
but that's an interesting area of differentiation. Those school, all the elements that kids use in school, they're usually not things that we learn when we learn a language, and they tend to differ a lot. Say, for example, in other Spanish-speaking countries, I remember going to Uruguay and working with students in schools in Uruguay, and everything was called differently. Everything had a different name, and when you learn English, you typically don't learn the name for those things in English. It's, escuadra, transportador, even down to
compás.
Sí, but even down to cartuchera, pencil box. But then who has a pencil box, right? They call those things other names. Anyway, so now, as regards what to do with Denise, she had the idea of making a video, uploading it to Classroom together with her assignment. I said that we still had to decide what to do next Friday, which I know is a holiday and you know is a holiday. And we said, well, what do we do? Now, we don't know if her Friday thing is going to be permanent or temporary, because we don't know if she has to go every Friday. Therefore, Friday the 9th and not Friday the 9th, she wouldn't have to go, but maybe the 16th she'd have to go. So what I offered to her was that maybe we could meet up, some of us who can, next Friday for a little while, so that she does her presentation, and that's it. And then, you know, and then I thought on the 16th we could meet up to have a general round off, and people can share what they did for their autobiographies, since we started doing that informally. I mean, you don't have to share everything you did, but maybe you can show the format, or maybe you can show some highlights of what you said. Maybe, I don't know, if you used photographs, you show some photographs. We can always we'll look on them sympathetically, Angeles, don't worry. We'll just laugh at the ones where you were very small. And
I included photos, very, very small, without teeth, like smiling, no teeth. So you can laugh at me. I don't care. I like photos.
They're great. And they're the most memorable things that, I love photos. So, but, maybe you have audios, maybe you have videos. I don't know. We can have a general sort of session where we just share those experiences and we talk about those things on the 16th. And on the 9th, we just meet for a little while, those who can, to listen to Denise, so that she doesn't have to do a video, which is kind of not very, especially since she was ready last time and we postponed it. And I just think it's because she started out saying, in her message, she started, aquí está la niña problemática otra vez. Not niña problemática. What are you talking about? Sorry, Lucas, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say I have no problem in meeting next week.
You mean you don't have some exciting thing to do on July the 9th?
I will be working, so...
Okay. Okay, and for today, I thought we could go over some things that, that after at the end of the slides, after this slide, there's a bunch of stuff that, hasn't fitted into, what we've been saying, but that you can look at, and that we can chat about later on the 16th or on the 9th or whatever. The official end of the course is this class recordings slide that I'm showing. Am I showing? Yes, I'm showing. So it's 177. But after that, there's, after this one, some more material you may find of interest, in fact, right? So, if in these 2 weeks you want to look at any of that and anything that, you're particularly interested in, we can answer questions, or we can talk about those things on the 16th too. But let's look a little bit about at the things that, the first thing, I don't know if you had time to go over the articles that I left last time for you. There were short ones and then there were longer ones, and the idea was to share if you had time to read any of these at all. Did you?
No, sorry.
No, Cristina,
okay.
I'm sorry, but
that's okay. It's okay. I've got other things, so don't worry. Okay. We have here some second language acquisition. Oops, there you go. metaphors to explore, if you like, right? They refer to second language acquisition being a process, right? So something that takes place over time and has different stages, not a single event. And there's 4 metaphors there, right? A roller coaster ride, going on a journey, swimming in the ocean, becoming a new person. These are metaphors that have been used in the literature, not the scientific literature, right? But people have referred to language learning in these terms. Which one do you agree with, or which one do you disagree with? Take a minute and decide.
I agree with the first one.
Why is that?
I think it's because my experience as a student or as a person who has learned English, I think it has to do with the situation and the teachers, those important teachers in my life.
Tell us about
what
them.
I mean is important, not only the inspiring teachers, but the other ones.
How? You mean the non-inspiring teachers, the ones that put you off learning?
Yes. Well, first of all, as a teacher, we learn from the non-inspiring a lot because we don't want to be like them.
Okay. Yeah, I fully agree with that, actually. And I tell my kids that about any kind of teacher. You can learn from the bad teachers. Maybe not as much, but you can definitely learn from the bad teachers.
Yeah, and we also can learn that sometimes we are not the problem. We are not the ones who blame. I mean, sometimes we need some kind of inspiration to catch up or to reach something.
And how does that inspiration work exactly? Because we want to inspire, right? And we want to be inspired, but when does it work for you? How does that work?
In my case, go, Anna, go.
No, it's okay. I'm still thinking about it.
I think it's inspiration. It's based on example, like the way you work, how the way you work inspires. I see sometimes that teachers who are inspirational for me, it's because they are an example to follow. It's not like blah blah, like words in the air. You see the way they work, the way they plan their classes, how much they know. And I think when I see them, I want to be like them someday. And they are not very many teachers who are inspirational to me. I think I can count them with my hand, with the fingers of one hand.
So you're very selective in that respect. Okay.
Yes, or I was not exposed to, but I mean, I'm not saying that teachers were not good. I had a grammar teacher who was really good because he knew a lot, but it was not the kind of teacher I would like to be. So one thing is that if they know a lot, and a different thing is how they impart, how they teach, how the way they are, the way they work. Because this teacher knew a lot, but his classes were horrendous, really, and he enjoyed making us suffer. He was not sympathetic, comprehensive. He lacked all the social skills that usually teaching have.
Give me just 1 second, because in my new location, somebody is knocking at my window. Just a second.
Well, I agree with you, Mariana. I do not have I can count them with one hand, actually. Yeah. Inspirational teachers. Yeah.
Being good and bringing a lot of knowledge doesn't make you a teacher.
Yeah, that's right. Totally.
I agree with you, Marian. Yeah. When the teacher asked us about inspiration, I said, well, it's too deep, you know. So I was thinking that I agree with you in terms of role model, and that knowledge is not all for a teacher.
No.
Especially nowadays that you have internet and you check the facts after the teacher said them, right?
Right.
So it's the way how they transmit that specific knowledge, right?
Sorry, I just did exactly what role models should not do, which is allow a class to be interrupted. But I tried to. The fish arrived, and my husband didn't know if it was supposed to be frozen or not frozen, if it was going in the fridge or the freezer, or sorry. Anyway, the knowledge transmission view of teachers was a very pervasive way of teaching, right? I used to have teachers, and there were teachers, some of my colleagues used to teach from books that they would not share with their students. They wouldn't tell them what book they were teaching from because it was their book. They would cover the book with paper so that the students wouldn't know, because then they would know the answers.
I heard something similar from someone told me about a class she had, and that the teacher was talking about a book, and when the students asked about the book so that she could give them a link or something, no, this is just for me, she said. It was kind of surprising to that she said that. I am not talking at I don't know, at secondary level. This is teacher training college level.
And it shouldn't happen at secondary level.
Wow.
No, of course not. Of course not. No.
But
it's even worse.
Absolutely.
You can even
it stems from an insecurity, because it's like you've obtained this knowledge, you have it, and then that's what you're going to transmit to the coming generation, right? And that's it. That's your role. Information transmission, right? Which is not what it should be about, right? It should be about getting students to think for themselves, getting students to develop the skills to obtain the information, getting students to challenge their preconceptions, and so on and so on and so on, right? I don't need to tell you about this, but it's I mean, I sympathize with what Mariana was saying in terms of numbers, right? Maybe not fingers of one hand, but the risk takers among teachers are few and far between. Maybe the risk takers among people are few and far between, right? Doing things that are out of the ordinary is risky, and it takes guts, and it's going against, and it causes people trouble, and people don't want to be unusual, and it also requires effort and conviction, and people don't always have those. They kind of do a job, and they, I've seen people teach with old yellowing cards that they sometimes inherited from their tutors, and it's like there's nothing.
I remember the final examinations with that kind of cards.
Yeah, no, it's just wrong. I mean, the example I just gave you about language changing is something that we all need to be aware of, but everything changes, not just language. And this idea that particularly in higher education, and in this sense, I agree with Lucas, perhaps other levels of the education system have a greater emphasis in other areas, right? There's certain core skills that need to be developed. Socialization is very important, but in higher education, you need to at least become aware that the horizon is always moving, that you've never attained knowledge. It just, it's not possible, because once you've learned everything there is to learn, there's somebody else developing new knowledge. And that's what's exciting about science and about any field, right? Even if it's not science, even if it's literature, there could be a new literary movement developing somewhere. And if you think that literature is just learning the classics or the non-classics and repeating what somebody else has said about them, you're missing out. That may be necessary, that may be a part of it, and you can't, it's very difficult to develop something new if you don't know anything about anything, right? As well, that's the catch-22 of education, I think. You know what catch-22 is? It's like being between a sword and between a rock and a hard place. Entre la espada y la pared. Catch-22 is actually a book. Yeah? But it's an expression that means, let's look at Wikipedia because it's the best. There's a film, it's a thing in logic, and you've got this disambiguation. But let me, where is it? The film, the adaptation, where's the expression? Well, it's a lot of things, as you can see. But I want the, it's a mnemonic. Wow. It's things that I didn't know even existed, but there you go. The most significant novels of the 20th century. It uses a distinctive non-chronological third person, separate storylines. The novel is set during the Second World War. The book was made into a film, but that's not what I want you to. It's a problem for which the only solution is denied by a circumstance inherent in the problem or by a rule. Okay, so it's an impossible problem to solve. It's a catch-22. The problem itself cannot be solved. Okay. So why did I mention this? Because it's you have to learn stuff in order to generate new stuff, but you can't go so far down the rabbit hole of learning stuff that you forget that creative side of developing new stuff. Because there's so much stuff that and I keep using the word stuff intentionally, right? There's so much stuff that you can keep continually learning because you like learning, because you've got good memory, because you're into being a good student, and it can truly be a rabbit hole in the sense of Alice in Wonderland, right? You just get lost, and you can go on learning interesting facts forever, but if you don't do anything with them, if you don't contribute anything to anything, then you haven't done anything original. You've just kind of become like a glorified diskette or CD. And, there are CDs and diskettes and computers and pen drives and whatever that can do that job much better than we can. On the other hand, if you don't know anything about anything, you're stuck. So it's the balance between those two things. And so part of the solution to that problem is thinking that, okay, it's being able to get at the information or the knowledge, which is different from information, that you need in order to solve the problems that you have. Right? You don't need to know everything in order to work out a particular problem. Right? You need to know certain things, but you need to be able to get at that information. You need to have the skills to be able to find what it is that you need. Right? Interestingly, I see it now with teachers and technology. Right? I had a teacher contact me the other day, Joaquin Gonzalez teacher. She was saying, Mute tab is not working. She uses breakout rooms in Meet, and there's this extension called Mute tab that you can use to mute the tabs. Okay. And I said, okay, well, have you tried uninstalling it? Have you tried? And then she said, I hear them all at the same time, all the classes, so it's not working. And they hear the other groups. And I'm like, it's impossible. They can't hear the other groups if they're in different meets. It turned out that what she was doing was she was unmuting them, but she was using the speakers on the computer without using headphones. So what the students were saying was being picked up by the microphone in the laptop. So it was a technical, practical problem, right? But I said, have you Googled it? Oh, I didn't think of it. You can Google practically anything. And you can Google not just, what's the capital of Mongolia, which is a fact. You can Google questions that are problems that you're having, and somebody else has usually had the problem. What's that, Lucas?
How to breathe. There are so many. Breathe. How to breathe.
You can.
Yeah, I've heard. But I've heard it. Yeah, that someone looked for that. I mean, people look for many things on Google.
If you have to figure that one out, I think you're in more trouble than my colleague.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you think about the answers that you can get to the question how you breathe, and I think back on how I learned how the respiratory system worked. I remember drawing, right, in school, in primary school, the lungs and the trachea and the nostrils, and you had to draw everything. And those drawings meant very little because it was all very, particularly in primary school, right? If you'd never seen a lung, it was very difficult to picture that, right? Now you get the good doctor, right? When he has to solve the problem and he sees everything in 3D, right? This augmented reality thing. Now imagine teaching how we breathe using that. It's a completely different thing, right? You just manipulate, and you can turn and you can put these augmented reality glasses on, and you can almost touch these things, right? I remember going to something very specific, pronunciation, right? When we do what was it a student told me about the other day? Let me see if I can find it now. This is another thing. Students figuring things out, and enriching what we do in the classroom. This launch. I don't know if you've this thing. Have you come across this?
No.
Okay.
I can see what it is. I recognize it, but I've never seen it.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
it's let me show you to you in a different way, because the key thing here is, of course, sound. But let me where is it? Here? No, this one. No, the other one. Shoot. Wait a minute. Let me just change this. Okay, there we go. You mean thing. Why are you doing that to me? Wait a minute. There. Okay. Do you hear weird noises being made?
It's interactive.
Of course it is. Isn't it fabulous?
It is.
Now you've got the stops, the fricatives, the nasals, the soft palate.
Mhm.
And the pitch too.
Great,
Yeah, everything.
great.
Isn't it amazing? Why is that in? Is that in German? In English? Let's do it in English.
No, I think you just clicked
I just
on.
made it.
You switched to German, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. This will switch it to
There.
German. Sorry. Yeah. So it's in English. We want it in English. I don't know. There's so many of these things, right? We were talking about Google Translate the other day, right? And what to do with it and how to use it in the classroom and whether to use it or not to use it. But these tools are out there, right? If we deny their existence, we're missing out, and we are generating a classroom that is so distant from the real world that our students think that it's pointless. It's like the pretend thing you have to do for the teacher in the classroom, which is not what you would have to do in real life, right? Anyway, that's the pink trombone, which you can explore to your heart's content. And as I say, it was contributed by a student. I didn't know it existed. I presume, I hope, phonetics teachers know how to use it, and there must be loads of tools like this to teach things that seemed quite abstract originally, and that can be me sirve, esa también es otra, muy
Me
bien.
sirve también.
Me sirve.
sirve.
Totalmente. Bueno, anyway, this all started with you talking about the metaphors for language learning, which we're going to go back to. Acá estábamos. And Anna was saying that it was the first one that worked for her. What about the rest of you? What do you think?
Well, I like the one about swimming in the ocean because of its unpredictability, perhaps the fact that the ocean is unpredictable. The waves are unpredictable, and so is
not entirely, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing, because there's a difference between perception and, say, the predictability of tides. Waves are not entirely predictable, but the tide, there is a rhythm to it. The thing is that you have to discover it.
Of course. Well, so with language, that's what happens. We do not know what is coming next or what we will learn about the language. There will always be something new to learn about, always. And that's not necessarily something bad. Well, there it says, and the next you're overwhelmed by a wave, but that's, that would be negative, but the fact that it's unpredictable doesn't mean it's bad, actually.
Absolutely. What about you, Mariana, Angeles? What do you think?
I was thinking about the one about going on a journey. I like that one. I think there are so many things.
You want to go traveling.
But that's no secret.
Where do you want to go?
Well, let's organize a group trip.
Yeah, I really like that one because of the journey metaphor. I think there is always something new to learn, new to do, something new to watch online. So I think that's why for me it's a journey.
and you get to meet people and you get to learn things other than the things that you intended to learn sometimes, right?
Exactly.
So there is an element of the unexpected, the bit of the filled with surprises, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what your expectations specifically were about this course, and whether you thought that we would end up talking about Catch 22 or pink trombones, but you know, I sometimes don't know that that's going to happen. And that's the thing about the synchronous classes, right? And I'm not sure they need to be face to face for that, but that is what the class where we meet makes sense, because I plan certain things that I plan to do in a class, but then things come up, and then we take a side road following with the journey idea, and then we come back, and then we kind of integrate it, and that happens in a synchronous class when we all get together. If I were to upload material that you could read and activities that you could do, we would probably cover the same content of the subject, but that spontaneous side of the class, which is, I think, very important, and which nobody seems to really talk about when they talk about, going back to schools and the face-to-face side of things. And I think the incidental learning that takes place in face-to-face classes, or in synchronous classes, let's say, because we won't have face-to-face classes, right, in this course. But that bit we can still have, right? And I think that's what is sometimes missing in the virtual class, depending on how it's set up, right? I put a story on MOOCs in my Instagram a few hours ago, right? And I was amazed at their responses. It's not closed yet, but I think 90% of the people who responded said that they had never taken a MOOC, right?
I answered.
You answered yes or no?
Me too.
No.
Right.
Me too, and I answered no.
Sorry, what's that?
In my Instagram, I asked if people had taken MOOCs, right? MOOCs are massive. I didn't say what they were, but online open courses, right? Massive online open courses. And this is a movement that started, I don't know, a decade ago, I think. It's part of a larger movement that has to do with open access, open science, open government. And basically what it boils down to is, say, for example, open science, right? We all pay our taxes, supposedly, right? So we all contribute to the development of science, right? So why should the results of that science be restricted to a small group of people? Up until a few decades ago, it was for practical logistical reasons. Journals were published in paper format, and they were sent to libraries that could buy them, right? So if you needed to know the latest thing that was published in medicine, you had to access the paper version of the journal, right? Now, technology has made it possible for all these things to open up. Now, there are ways and ways of opening those things up. Also, there's this idea of open government. For example, the city of Buenos Aires and many cities have a database of the trees that are planted in the city. Yeah, because they need to know what is planted where, right? As part of an open government initiative, they opened up that database so that anybody can consult it. You think, oh, well, what's the point? Well, if you're planning to move and you have an allergy to a particular kind of tree, you can check out whether there's a tree of that kind near where you're planning to move. useful information that should be available to everybody. Now, the trick there is making just opening the information is not enough, because access is more than just opening it up, right? If you want the general public to understand it, it has to be presented in a way that is clear. I'll show you something that the Australian government did. This, for example. Okay, let me close. Because the key thing is how they present, creating jobs, guaranteeing, budget. I had a good link to this, but I don't know if I still have it. Pathways to home ownership. No, let me see. Open access policy, Australian Research Council. Okay, no, wait. I know it seems like we're not talking about second language acquisition, but okay. Choice. Okay, let's learn to click on things properly, shall we? Is this the one? Okay. This is something that they did to do a participatory budget. Again, budgets are things that politicians design, but that affect everybody, right? And transparency is a key issue there. Transparency score changed over time. You see how the information is presented, and you can access through this information, public participation compared to other countries, extent of opportunities for public participation in the budget process, recommendations, budget oversight, and all this has been made possible by technology, but also by decisions, right? Anyway, in the world of academia, the idea of MOOCs is that higher education is funded, even in private institutions, by taxpayers' money, right? And therefore, if technology allows it, those courses that are taught at those institutions, they should be made available to everybody. Now, how does this work? See here, this is mooc.org, which includes the edX.org, which is a consortium of MIT, Harvard, and those universities, right? So you can take courses in business management, computer science, data science, engineering, languages, humanities, innovative online programs, Now, what they do is they put up all their material. You can take courses on practically any subject you can think of, from Egyptian archaeology to engineering to medicine to whatever. And you've got two modalities usually. You can go through the material that is, presented in the structure that it would be presented in the courses, often with some interactivity where you can answer quizzes and so on and so forth. And at the end of it, you just, you get something that says that you went through the stuff, or you can do it for credit, in which case you have to pay, you have to pay a small fee, and you get evaluated, and you can actually use it towards a program, towards a formal program. But you see what the logic of it is? And many people just take a bit of a course. I took a course on the history of food and eating or something like that. just because I thought it was interesting, right? It wasn't for any professional, but the materials they have material and video. They have the greatest experts talking about these things. So, you know, it's really the world at your fingertips. And it's free. So it's like, okay, you know, why you can practically learn anything you want anytime from the best experts in the world, right? So, you know, you should try it out. Anyway, so we let's the journey. We were talking about the journey. Angeles. What about you, Mariana? Which one fits for you?
I agree with a bit of everyone. Because I felt all these ways throughout. I did my language by autobiography, and as I was planning it and recording it, I felt, or I had twists and turns. I was filled with surprises. I felt overwhelmed in a negative and a positive way, both. And then I became a new person at the same time. I think teaching also makes you a new person. I felt that I developed skills and social abilities that I otherwise I may have never developed. And also, when you are learning a language, you kind of have to think in the other language too. So maybe you, as an Argentinian, a culture is different from an English one. So you have to think of the other, or think in the other language, I think. When I traveled, I used to behave differently because people are different in different parts of the world. So I think, yeah, you become a new person too, learning a new language.
You adapt, right? You adapt your behavior to the context, and you know, like you adapt when you go to different parts of the country, or when you visit different groups of people, or when you know, whatever. Remember, we have some question marks on whether we actually think in another language, right? Whether we have ideas and then we put them through the filter of the languages we speak, right? And then, you know, we this is the idea of the linguistic repertoire that Ofelia Garcia and the translanguaging people have, right? So if I say, yeah, when you travel, you adapt, and, you know, well, you know, c'est la vie, right? If I say c'est la vie, I could say that's life, or así es la vida, right? But if I choose to say c'est la vie, it's for a reason, right? And it may not. It may mean that I'm being pretentious and I'm using French because it's a, I don't know, posh language, or it may mean that I'm using the we're actually going to see something in relation to that in a minute. But it's accessing the repertoire that we have, and mixing and matching depending on the circumstances, right? Depending on what has the desired effect. And sometimes the desired effect works and sometimes it doesn't, right? It's like with most of the things that Lucas has been saying, sometimes we go, because we don't know what he's talking about. Right? And in that sense, learning that teenage language is also part of this, you know, entering a different culture, right? Even if it lives under the same roof as us. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at a couple more things. This is Andrew Carney, who has written several books on syntax and generative language and generative analyses of language. And he also did his graduate studies on Irish, which you may also have heard as Gaelic.
Gaelic.
Yeah. Gaelic, that word that I just wrote is Gaelic if it refers to Irish. It's Gaelic if it refers to the language spoken in Scotland, right? They're both Celtic languages, together with Welsh. I'm going to turn off my background because it's eating up my battery. And I'm going to ask somebody to bring me a charger because I'm going to run out of. So you see a horrible green thing instead of the lovely thing that you were seeing. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Anyway, so Irish is a language. It's a Celtic language, as I was saying. It's a threatened language. It's an endangered language. But in this piece, he talks about the contrast between learning and acquiring a language, which is a topic that we've kind of discussed on and off, and which I want you to pay attention to. Let me see. Let me skip the. See what he says about it. And while we listen to him, I'm going to. No, I need to change the way I'm presenting so that you can actually hear him. Okay. I'm going to silence myself because I've got the dog barking and everything's going crazy.
The Syntax, a Generative Introduction, 4th edition. My name is Andrew Carney. I'm a professor of linguistics at the University of Arizona. I'm the author of your textbook, and I'll be leading you through this series of video tutorials. We closed the last video with the issue of levels of adequacy in determining whether or not our grammars, our hypotheses, are good or not. The final level of adequacy we talked about was explanatory adequacy, in which we are required to explain real-world data, our judgments, and also to try and get at why language looks the way it is, and how we come to know the things that we know. If we're really interested in explanatory adequacy, we're going to have to ask the question, how did we get our syntactic knowledge? In this unit, we're going to briefly explore the idea that some amount of knowledge comes from an innate universal grammar that all humans come equipped with. Now, there are some challenges to this. We first of all have to figure out what is part of this universal grammar and what is part of some language-specific rules. And we're going to have to figure out why it's possible that we speak different languages if we're all equipped with an innate universal grammar. Before we delve into the issue of universal grammar, I do want to make one little terminological distinction. First of all, I want to talk about the difference between learning and acquisition. Learning is where you gain some kind of knowledge using conscious means. Acquisition is where you gain some kind of knowledge using subconscious means. So, for example, chemistry and linguistics are things you learn. But the evidence seems to suggest that languages are best.
Sorry,
Yes,
did you
it's
just...
sharing.
Cristina, you are not sharing.
We lost you.
Sorry, it's behaving funny. It may be the battery issue again. I'll just try again.
seems to suggest that languages are best acquired rather than learned. Other examples of things that you might acquire might be walking or learning to dance. You don't consciously think about them, you just do them. It seems like small children seem to acquire languages rather than learn them. They do it effortlessly. They don't actually think about what they're doing. They just try to learn the language. Adults, by contrast, who try to learn a language in a classroom often don't do so successfully. They are rarely fluent. Whereas adults who try to learn a language through acquisition rather than learning, so they go and they live with people and speak the language daily, are much more successful. So we have this distinction between learning and acquiring. We're mainly going to be talking about acquiring languages here. So before we consider a hypothesis like universal grammar, it's worth thinking about some other views of how we might acquire the syntax of language. One common view is that we are instructed by our parents. Another common view is that we simply mimic the behavior of our parents. So let's address both of those issues in turn. There are good reasons to think that both of those things are wrong. One reason is because mimicking is not a good solution because we actually produce and understand sentences that we've never heard before. And that is not what we would expect if language was merely mimicry. Similarly, we know things about our language that A, we've never been exposed to, and B, we certainly have never been instructed on. So let's pursue both of those topics before we consider what universal grammar might look like. So let's start with a very important challenge to these kinds of hypotheses. It turns out that we've discovered that you know things about your language that you've never been taught, and actually you could not have acquired simply by mimicking. So let's take the sentence, who do you think Sean hit? Now, we also have the sentence, who do you think that Sean hit? Now, the second sentence is a little awkward, but it's just as equally grammatical as the first one. So what conclusion might we draw about the presence of the word that? One obvious solution is to say that in English, words like that are optional when you're embedding one sentence inside of another. So we have the sentence, Sean hit something, and that's embedded under think. And then we turn that into a question. And you can either have the word that, or you can leave it off. Now the problem comes if we extend this to when we question not the object, as in these first two sentences, so the object of the verb hit is who, but the subject of the verb hit. So it's certainly the case that when you say, who do you think hit Bill, that you can leave off the word that. And that's perfectly consistent with the data in the first two sentences. But the problem comes if we try to put the word that in. Who do you think that hit Bill? It's terrible. It's not a good sentence of English. Why should that be the case? Well, first of all, you were never taught this fact. Nobody ever told you this, yet you know it if you're a native speaker. Secondly, there's no way you could have guessed it or mimicked it. Because in the first two sentences, which are sentences you might have heard as a kid, you can see that sometimes the word that is there and sometimes it isn't. So it's a logical conclusion then that the word that is optional. It can either be there or not. But what's surprising is that when you do the question of a subject, you have to leave off the word that. You can't put it in. And there's no way you could have deduced this simply by the data you might have heard. Because you never hear anybody say the ungrammatical sentence, and you never hear anybody saying, no, that's not right. So the conclusion we can draw from this is you know things you've never been taught and that you couldn't have deduced from the data around you. Consider the sentence, Susan thinks Bill loved a chimp. Now, I'm going to play fast and loose with the words think and wonder. They mean roughly the same thing, but they differ in whether or not the embedded clause can take a question word as the first word in it or not. So we're going to go back and forth between think and wonders, but essentially it's the same thing. So you can say, Susan thinks Bill loved a chimp. You can also ask the question, you can also state the statement, Susan wonders what Bill loved. So you can take the object of an embedded clause, turn it into a question word like what, and move that question word to the beginning of that embedded clause. Now, you can also turn the subject of that embedded clause into a question word. And you can say, who did Susan think loved a chimp? So here what you've done is you've taken Bill, turned it into a question word, and then you move it to the beginning of the very beginning of the sentence. Who did Susan think loved a chimp? Now notice both the second and third sentences are grammatical here. Susan wondered what Bill loved is fine, and who did Susan think loved a chimp is also fine. But what's really surprising is you can't do both of these. So you can't say, who did Susan wonder what loved? This is word salad for most native speakers of English. Why should that be the case? Both of the operations that created sentence number 2 and sentence number 3 are legitimate. Why is it that you can't do both of them? Again, this is something that you could not have learned. And it's also something that you could not have deduced just by listening to your parents. So it's clearly the case that we know things about our language that we could not have mimicked and we could not have learned. So that suggests that language might be an instinct. That is, it's born into us as an innate object which we might call universal grammar. The idea.
Okay. We don't need to go through the whole video. I just managed to plug the thing in and back. What were you able to get from Andrew Carney?
Well, we basically explain the difference between learning and acquisition in order to explain what universal grammar is. That basically learning is a conscious process, whereas acquisition is an unconscious one. And he immediately related to learning a language, which is said to be, which is acquired. For example, if you're a young child, but perhaps if you're an adult, you probably learn it. Well, that's my contribution. I'll let others talk.
That's good. That's basically a good summary. What else? Anything else? He immediately plunges into this sentence analysis, which is perhaps, the what he is most interested in, and perhaps not the focus of what we're interested in here. But that sort of evidence that he's presenting is what contributes to supporting this idea that this is an instinct, something that is innate, rather than something that is learned, because the sorts of knowledge that people have of their first language are not the sorts of knowledge that you would that has been taught to them, right? So that gives us a hint at the fact that this is at some level part of our genetic endowment. Now, what about second language learning in this view?
Well, second language learning is conscious. Well, depending on
okay, right.
Depending on what age you are learning it, again.
Okay.
How old you are when you're exposed to the language, how often how often do you use the language to also. The thing is that the older you are, the more conscious your learning will be,
because your first language will always interfere in the process of acquiring things. So functions like work like a filter.
It may help as well. Remember that it may help.
Yeah.
It's not always interference. It does help.
Yes, I refer to interference as something that it's always there, either because you compare.
It's just that interference has a very bad
negative connotation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's always there. It's a filter that you use.
Well, but that's where the iceberg analogy is interesting, because on the one hand it can support, but on the other hand, if you think that there's a filter, it means that the second language will always go through the first one, and that's what gets into this distorted idea that we're always translating in our heads, right? Like as if now you were translating what I'm saying into Spanish. I think it in Spanish, I put it into English, then I say it, then it goes to you, you hear it in English, then you translate it into Spanish. Are you doing all that, really? Nah.
No.
I sometimes use, most of the time, I use the expressions, or when I hear something in English and somebody tells me, okay, what did he say? And I have to think about it because I understood everything in English, but then when I have to say it in Spanish, it's kind of, hold on, and I have to think for a while, and I say it. So it's not like I make an immediate translation to Spanish because I think I'm thinking in English.
Mm-hmm. And it also we'd have trouble explaining things like what we've talked about when we've talked about code switching, right? When we code switch, what exactly do we do? Are we thinking in one language, then switching to the other one? Then how does that really work, right? And why do we code switch when we code switch as well, right? This is something that I wanted to, you can watch the rest of, oh God, that's really bad. Okay, it is interesting that the way human beings mix codes in order to communicate. In fact, I remember when I used to talk with an Italian friend, he was interested in practicing his English. This is from a student, right? And I was interested in practicing my Italian. In that time, I was learning Italian, so I knew enough vocabulary to communicate and be understood. So when we used to talk, many words I did not remember in English, or in fact, they were more common in Italian to Spanish because of the similarity. I used to mix English, Italian, and sometimes Spanish. In that way, we could communicate perfectly. Now I've read about the topic. It's interesting to realize that this mix exists as a common process of language acquisition, and it is necessary in order to communicate proficiently. As a teacher, I will pay more attention to this fact. I will try to explain this process to my students, but remember them, this is not a pretext to speak Spanglish. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting things brought in there, right? A student of mine was saying that her students always kept saying, kind of jokingly, Miss, can you give me the lapicera? And she would get upset with them and say, no, it's not the lapicera, it's a pen. And there's a points to saying that. One thing is when we're using English and Spanish in social contexts and we resort to our linguistic repertoire, but in the classroom, we do certain things for pedagogical purposes, right? So if we, always go on about lapicera, well, we may kind of have issues with remembering how to say that in English, right? So there may be a kind of code of conduct that we may want to agree on with our students to pretend that we don't speak Spanish in the classroom, right? And sometimes people have the fine. Do you know this concept of the how does it? the jar, the swear jar. Have you?
Yeah.
Yes.
The Simpsons.
The Simpsons.
Yes,
An old chapter, an
Totally.
old episode about that.
But the Simpsons pick it up from a cultural. They didn't invent it, right? It exists in the culture, and the idea is that when you swear, you put some money in a jar, and then that money gets spent in some way or other, right? So it's a kind of negative reinforcement. Yeah, we're talking about conditioning. Yeah, our friend Skinner and the Pavlov salivating dogs, right? So you can have positive and negative reinforcement. This is pure psychology. This is not second language acquisition, right? But if you get negative reinforcement, you abstain from a certain behavior, supposedly, right? That's the theory, right? Of course, you're not going to get your, I don't know, primary school or secondary school students to put money in a jar. Well, especially not now because we don't. But you could have a kind of virtual jar where they, and then that becomes some kind of, they have to do something, right, or tell a joke or do something funny, or some kind of task that they wouldn't like doing. But it is a kind of negative reinforcement idea, right? It's not positive. The positive reinforcement comes in the forms of used to see this a lot in American classrooms. The stars used in classrooms, right? So the names of students who are given stars, right? That with stickers or with stamps. And so every time a student does something good, they get stars. I don't know. It's a very, again, it's conditioning. It's pure conditioning. From a psychological point of view, it's probably not the best, but sometimes it works, right? So you accumulate lots of stars. People do it even in their homes with their children, right? They set the table and they give them a star. They I don't know, whatever, and then they collect stars and they get, I don't know, a toy. Yeah. But anyway, now for code switching in a more systematic understanding of code switching, okay, I don't want to activate any free trial of anything. Goodbye, go away. Anyway. This is a presentation that refers to what code switching is all about. Now, code is a term that appears in the expression code switching, expressly avoiding language, right? Because we switch codes, not just languages, right? So when we talk to the teenagers who use the language that Lucas was using earlier, we code switch as well. We may or may not, right?
I'm now the ambassador of of that kind of language, of teenagers' language.
Yeah, officially. Yeah.
Now that you're talking about code switching, it reminded me of games environment in which Spanish speakers use a lot of English in while they are talking, and I feel because they are used to it and it's more comfortable for them to use them. I don't know. For example, in this game they have to ban some heroes so that the other group does not use them. And instead of saying prohibir, while they are talking, they say bania este. They use the term in English. Of course, they say it with the Spanish accent, absolutely, but they use the term ban as if it were a Spanish word, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. So, code moves away from the idea of a language, but it refers to these variations as well, right? And it refers to words, it refers to sentences, it refers to sounds, so sounding like somebody else. That also, even in writing, it can work, right? Well, we know what the definition of monolingual is. We've discussed the issue with the definitions of bilingual at the beginning of the course, remember? And of course, multilingual. Sometimes in the literature, bilingual is used to refer to anyone who speaks many languages too, right? Now, the issue of code switching can be at the lexical level. So specifically using individual words. It may be unpredictable, likely to change. We don't necessarily know when it's going to happen. It may also happen at the phonological level, as Lucas was saying, the way in which something is pronounced. Okay. Let's see. And well, we mentioned this unpredictability, the issue that both languages are reflected in whatever switches occur. So that there's languages or varieties, as we mentioned, but the key thing is that this happens in a single context, in a single conversation, right? It may happen within a sentence, it may happen across sentences. Okay, and here we have some examples that are provided in terms of different styles, different dialects, different reasons. This is also interesting, why it is that people code switch in particular points of the sentence, because they can't find the word, because they don't know the word, to fill a gap, because they find it easier to switch to the other language, to avoid misunderstanding, for the sake of clarity. That often happens in classrooms, right? When you want the students to understand, you switch into Spanish. When you want to tell them off, then they have, different associations. To convey intimacy, so that others don't understand, you have to be careful with that one, right? Lucas, you were smiling guiltily.
No. I was. No, it reminded me of some conversation I heard, or I overheard, perhaps. I overheard, and that it was in Spanish, but then it was in another language, which I don't know which that was. And well, that was for no one to hear, to hear it, so that no one could understand it. And of course, it reminded me of some funny episodes of The Simpsons. I always relate everything with The Simpsons, so don't mind me.
Oh, no, we want to know. You should make a compilation of the funny Simpsons episodes. We want to know.
Well, there is one in which Manjula, in which Apu's mother is at the Simpsons' house, and she is talking. And since Marge is there, present on the room, she starts talking Hindu. How to say?
Hindu, yeah.
Hindu, so that Marge does not listen to her, and she switches from English, that would be, to Hindu. So she does it on purpose, and of course Marge reacts negatively by looking at her because she's talking about her, actually.
Right. And part of the issue is that you're never 100% sure of who understands what, right? I remember when I was living in England, the first year, a couple of friends came to visit me, and I was living in Cambridge, and we went to London for a day out, and we were coming back on the train, and this was the time when you could smoke in trains, and my friends were smoking, and it was a fairly empty train, and there was a lady, not too far away, and my friends were smoking, and the woman coughed, and one of my friends said, parece que a la vieja le molesta que fumemos. Bueno, okay, we kept going, and then as we were getting close, I stood up and I checked something on the, the kind of train map where they show where the stops are and stuff. I said, no, because I'm not sure we took this train or that train. And then she intervened and said, no, this one goes to, and she spoke Spanish. She said it in Spanish. And of course she'd understood when my friend had said, a la vieja le molesta que fumemos. Anyway, so you never know for sure, right? You may, make a good guess, but you can't be sure. So these are some of the reasons. Then you have a classification of code switching. There's intersentential. We talked about inside the sentence. There's intersentential. So within sentences or clauses, that's where the switch can occur. You can also have tag switching, where where the place where the switch occurs is where the tag is. Well, here you've got some more on the reasons of code switching, some more examples, intra, inter, or mixing words. Usually there's a lot with Spanish. This is a presentation produced by a student in the US, and there's a lot with Spanish and English, of course, right? Then a slightly different definition, the idea of code mixing, where there's less of a reflection of the grammars of both languages simultaneously, where there's one matrix language and words borrowed into that matrix language, right? And again, you've got a selection of reasons for code mixing. And a classification. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. I mean, you can go over these later on if you're particularly interested, and we can, look into them a little bit later. But I want to. We seem to have lost Angeles, right?
Yes.
Earlier than usual. Okay. Before my I've got internet now back on, but I want to play something for you. But before I do that, a couple of things. Here, there's some quotes from Ellis from Second Language Acquisition that maybe we can discuss next time we meet, that refer to how second language research relates to the classroom. And he presents 4 different views, okay, on how this works. And maybe you can think about what you think about this. Which one is really the best option? And the other thing that I want you to start thinking about is that in the classroom, you'll find an end of course survey, which I have so that you can give me feedback. So start thinking about that, have a look at it so that you can think about, what to complete. It's about how much material, the modality, so that I can improve things for coming courses. But what I want to do with you is this. Have you seen any of the lineup videos on any topic?
No.
Shaking heads. No. Okay. Well, I don't know if I should explain it or just show it to you. Basically, what you're going to see is a group of people who will speak their language to some people who are blindfolded. And those people who are blindfolded have to guess which language they are speaking. Okay. So this is something that we do all the time, right? When we come across a language we don't know, we try to guess which language it is, right? Where the person is from. I want you to pay attention to 2 things. I want you to pay attention to which languages are mentioned. Yeah? Which languages are spoken and which languages are mentioned. And more importantly, I want you to pay attention to what strategies the people guessing use to guess the languages that they're hearing. Sometimes they ask the other people to say something. Sometimes they make associations. Yeah. I want you to pay attention to what it is that they ask them to do or to say, and to what information they use to try and guess which languages are being spoken. Okay? Is that all right? Let's have a go and see how we do. And you yourselves try and guess which languages are being spoken as well, if you want to. Okay? I'll play a bit, then I'll stop and we can talk, and then I'll play a bit more. And yeah? Okay, here we go.
Man neuken in the kitchen.
I
asked him if he wanted to fuck me in the kitchen.
Do you speak any other languages but English? I grew up in an environment in which there was Cantonese and Tagalog. And the first couple years of grad school, I taught like the introduction class to linguistic anthropology.
I speak Korean, Japanese, Portuguese.
I'm from Detroit, so like, Ebonics.
Consider that English.
It's a form of English.
Today, you're playing a little game.
Yes.
Yes. What language are you speaking?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that sounds cool.
Are you ready? Yeah, I'm nervous.
Am I blindfolded?
I'm gonna blindfold you at first. You'll make a guess blindfolded, then you'll take your blindfold off.
That wasn't part of the sign up, because I don't like being blindfolded. I wore a hat today because I didn't do my hair.
Puta que pariu! Que caralho! Nossa, hoje foi foda. O dia foi complicado.
I know what you're speaking, but I don't know what you're saying to me, and it makes me feel scared.
Como você sabe o que eu tô falando se você não sabe o que eu tô falando? Como assim?
Could you ask me, hi, how are you doing?
Oi, tudo bem?
Can you insult me? Say, I hate you, black man.
Eu te odeio, negão.
Wait, what'd you call me?
Try to speak whatever this language is back to the person.
The language she is speaking is derivative of Spanish.
No.
It's not? Okay, say,
Vem da mesma origem,
say
mas-
brother.
Irmão.
Nope, it's not Spanish.
Go ahead and take out your blindfold. Wow. Were you screaming at me in Portuguese?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I was born in the city and countryside of São Paulo State.
Okay.
In Brazil.
Yeah.
Yes, I speak Portuguese.
Portuguese, okay,
It is a
because
Latin.
you were, I got the Latin part in the beginning because there were a lot of familiar words, and like, so it's a little bit different, and I don't know
Yeah,
Portuguese.
it's 100% the word that people think that I speak when I'm speaking Portuguese. People think I'm speaking Spanish.
Can you teach me something in Portuguese?
Oi, hi.
Oi,
Meu nome é,
meu nome é...
and your name.
meu nome é Chris.
Yeah,
Obrigado.
de nada.
Portuguese. I was close.
Okay, so what can you tell me?
Well, I'm glad I understood it was Portuguese, but that's not so much of an accomplishment.
Why?
Because it's similar to our language, and we are in contact with Portuguese, or at least we know how it sounds. It's easy to identify for us.
We rely on transparent words.
Right. So you're being helped by similarity, transparency, and exposure, right? Because perhaps had it been Portuguese from Portugal, bit more
That's a
difficult,
different
right?
thing,
Yeah. And you're learning Portuguese. That kind of helps, right? Hopefully.
Learning.
Okay.
I started.
We learned how to say these in Portuguese. You remember? Ana, do you remember?
How to say what?
This?
Inverted commas.
Las comillas. In the inverted commas. We learned how to say them last class.
Oh, I was absent last class. That's why.
He said what? Okay. My long-term memory is failing.
Well, it's not that long term. It's pretty.
Not that long. It's long. For me, it's a week ago.
Our dimension of time is different.
Anything else that you
especially
noticed?
this time of year. Yeah,
Maybe
guy who is on the screen, he asks for other words. Like, can you say brother? Can you say, because maybe he knew some.
What? How does he pick the words he asks? How do you think? How would you pick? What words would you?
Maybe because he know, that word in Spanish, and he is guessing the kind of, well,
right. In fact, he asked her to say brother, and then from that he figures out that it's not Spanish.
Not Spanish.
Right. Yeah. So it has to be a high frequency word, right? As well, right? Because anything else?
You know that some people in the States use this amigo or things like that. They borrow from Spanish, so maybe he relies on those words just to say
even
whether
if he knows Spanish himself.
Yes.
Right. Good. Anything else?
Maybe it was difficult for them to guess the language because they were, they cannot see the people who was talking.
That's right. But that's intentional. Why do you think that is?
Because if you've got an Asian person, you may that may be misleading.
I think it's also because of the body language.
Okay.
Not only the articulation, but also the body language. I don't know. I think that we tend to move our hands all the time. We use a lot of gestures.
Right.
One of them asks the person to insult him.
That's right.
I don't like you, black man. I didn't get why. I couldn't know. I don't know why.
But an insult. She started out insulting the swearing, right? Not insulting the guy, but swearing. Why could that be?
I think it was just for fun because they answered, "Oh, what did you?"
There is an element to the emotional in swearing, right? An emotional language, and maybe language that has been overheard in certain contexts.
I think it's clearer in the sense that you know that person is insulting you when you hear it. So perhaps you do not understand exactly what that other person is saying, but by the way in which the intonation, the different characteristics of how he or she says it, you feel that it's an insult. I don't know, maybe in that way he would recognize the language.
Possibly.
Yeah, but some cultures speak like they are arguing all the time. Like when you go to the Chinese restaurant, Chinese supermarket, and they are, and then you think, oh my God, they are having a huge argument. And then some of them says, ha ha ha. I know, they were just normal.
Well,
talk,
here we also have a strong tone for compared to other dialects,
like Italian people, when sometimes when they talk and they sound angry.
I mean, when I went to Peru, an old lady was annoyed and she yelled me and my friend because she thought that we were angry and that we were mistreating her because of her tone. And all of us were talking Spanish.
Right. So she got the impression that you were being
that we were rude.
Angry. Yeah.
And it was just a question of tone.
Yeah. Well, let's see what else. What other languages are mentioned or... did you notice any languages that were unusual? This guy in the picture, he says he speaks Ebonics.
Ebonics, yeah.
You may have come across it as BEV or AAVE, like English vernacular or African American vernacular English. Remember Jamila? And
yes, I remember.
That would be it, right? And there's a whole debate about the names of these languages, but all dialects. Any other one? Anything else that you noticed?
Okay. Yeah, I think one of them spoke Japanese. I don't remember now.
Okay,
short-term memory failing.
One of them tried to imitate the language, like using some consonants, like brr, brr, brr.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what else we get from this.
Hallo, ik heet Diana en ik ben hier vandaag om te zien als jij kunt raden welke taal ik ben aan het spreken.
I don't know if I've ever heard this language. What?
Yell something like angry, like fuck, you know? Putain!
Say the name Hitler.
Maar dat naam is gewoon Hitler.
She's German. German.
I mean, it sounds Germanic. Verstehst du Hochdeutsch?
Ik versta u.
Hi.
Als jij traag praat.
Okay, I'm asking if she understands High German?
So knowledgeable. This person speaks another language. 对，所以我妈妈是中国人，但是我爸爸是比利时人。
That's some type of Asian. I'm not sure what Asian, but they speak real fast and it's like
我妈妈是中国人，
我
爸爸是比利时人，所以我也会说中文。
哎，我说的不好。
哦，你也会说中文，哇 ！Kind of understands both my languages. I feel defeated.
Can I look? Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, you're very pretty.
Oh, thank you.
She's Russian.
Russians have to be pretty.
Usually.
Dutch? No.
Russian?
German, Taiwanese.
Was he right?
Should I tell him?
Yeah. Are you
I was speaking Flemish.
Oh, Flemish.
In Belgium. Very, very similar to Dutch. It's just kind of like a dialect, honestly. It's what's spoken in Belgium, which is where my dad is from. And the second one I was speaking is Chinese, because my mom is Chinese. And so I learned those two languages from my parents and a little bit in school as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Salam, Carlos Netle.
Ooh.
Salam.
Sorry. Okay. So what about that one?
Well, one of the deductions of I don't remember the man. He spoke about the rhythm of the language. He talked about how fast she was talking, so he deduced that it must have been some Asian language.
So there's an issue with that. There's an identification of certain characteristics of the language as being part of a language group or a language family, right? So maybe I can't place the language itself, but I can get close to it. And several of them do, right? Because nobody says Flemish, which is what she's speaking, but they do say German, they do say Dutch. And this guy says Taiwanese when she's actually speaking Chinese. What she's probably speaking is Mandarin, right? You know, there's this whole thing about Chinese dialects. They're not actually dialects, but very often mutually unintelligible languages. We talked about the issue of intelligibility, right? And the Chinese dialects are not mutually intelligible, but they're called Chinese dialects because they fall under the same within the same country, really. But this is the language being a dialect with an army and a navy. Remember, we mentioned that. And Taiwanese, you know the problem between China and Taiwan. Do you? No? Okay. Taiwan is where when it's about to be 100 years now. They're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Communist Revolution in China, right? When the regime was removed by the Communist Revolution, the previous regime went to Taiwan. And Taiwan is an island off the coast of China, and it's not recognized as a country because of the power of China. And there's a whole international controversy. Somebody recently got into diplomatic trouble for recognizing Taiwan as a country. Who was it? Well, it's a huge diplomatic issue because China will get very cross with any country or any person that recognizes Taiwan as a country. Do you understand the problem? Mm-hmm. In Argentina, this is interesting because the first wave of Chinese immigration that we got around the 60s and 70s were Taiwanese. And the second wave of Chinese immigration is from mainland China. Okay. So there's a distinction between what people may be ethnically and the nationality they have. Ethnically, in China, there's all sorts of ethnicities, right? But the people in Taiwan are ethnically Chinese, but consider themselves Taiwanese in terms of nationality. But on the other hand, there's no Taiwanese ambassador because of the lack of recognition of the country. Anyway, you can look this up. It's an interesting thing. Anyway, so here we had an example of a bilingual from a one parent, one language model of bilingualism, right? Because she learned Flemish from her father and Chinese from her mother. Yeah? Anything else that we want to say about that particular example?
Again, the man asked to pronounce Hitler.
Which is a kind of weird thing.
Yeah.
It's a name. I mean, names.
Anyway, it's a name. But he usually resorts to that. Like, can you say this in your life? Can you say this? Like, can you say brother? Can you say Hitler? Can you?
Well, it's the Germanic thing that evokes that particular name, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anything else that we noticed? What about the other guesser? He spoke Chinese, didn't he? He was able to chat.
And he spoke German, and she spoke German. I feel defeated, she says.
Exactly, but he kind of guessed. He hadn't got it exactly. Okay.
Maybe because of the use of the intonation. I don't know anything about Chinese, but in general, I know that they're own languages.
Well, the thing about Chinese is that it is a tone language. It's actually not intonation at all. The thing about a tone language is Spanish and English are intonation languages where, you can change the meaning by changing the intonation. So, for example, I can say, who did you see? Who did you see? Who did you see? Who did you see? Who did you
who did you see?
Rice ball now. Rice ball and full rice.
Yeah,
rice ball, right.
You know what I mean.
Level tone.
High pitch, low pitch.
No, not going for all those. In Chinese, the typical example is that in one syllable, if you change the tone of that syllable, the meaning changes, right? So the typical example, ma is the example. Ma. And there's four tones, and it can mean things as different as mother and horse.
Chicken?
Horse, I think it is, but whatever. There's 4 different meanings, and so just by changing the tone, okay, so it's a tone language. Let's see this guy, what he speaks And you'll see that they get more exotic and more complex as we go along.
Ooh, say my name again.
Carlos.
See, you said it first. Say it with something else.
Salam Carlos It's
definitely from a Middle Eastern country, or speaking a language from a Middle Eastern country, like maybe a North African country.
Can you count to 10 for me?
Yeah. And hulet sost arat amis sidis sabat cement zet.
Sorry.
How do you say thank you?
Amasaganarlo.
Fuck, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this might actually be somewhere in the Middle East. Maybe?
I'm going with Egyptian. Oh, hi.
How you doing?
Okay.
Did you think I would look like this?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
He's speaking Egyptian. They thought it was even a fucking language.
Egyptian አይደለም የምናገረው አማርኛ ነው.
Was it?
አማርኛ. No.
Oh,
no. So it's not Egyptian. No. I told you I'm not speaking Egyptian. I'm speaking Amharic.
What is that?
Amharic is Amharic.
What is that?
My parents are from Ethiopia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there any like influence from the Arabic language into Amharic?
Kind of. So Arabic and Amharic and Hebrew, they're all like Semitic languages.
Okay.
So it comes from like that base. In the country of Ethiopia, there's over like 80 dialects, and Amharic, so Amharic, what I'm speaking, is considered like one of like the most like beautiful dialects.
I don't think it's very beautiful. But it's not a romantic language the way it sounds.
Could you share some?
Okay, so what did we get there?
How rude he was in describing the language. How can he say that? I would say, no, I can't believe it.
Yeah, he was very direct, right? Now, what about this issue of a language sounding romantic or beautiful, or what's that about? Because if you're asked, I don't know, is German a romantic language?
No, but we are based on our own conception of what romantic is.
And more than that, your own experience of German, which is what?
Yeah, probably negative because of the history of the country, maybe. I don't think
have
so.
you had with the language? Have you listened to German much?
Almost.
Yeah, but it's
only in videos where they say something in different languages, and the one that is very different is German, and it sounds so cold.
Angry.
So funny. Yes, and angry. There's these videos where someone says, I don't know, a word like nurse, enfermera, and it's different languages, and then rush in German. And of course, they exaggerate, but it's the idea that it does not sound so soft.
Yeah. There is a build-up of experience with the language where what you probably heard is a lot of actors playing German soldiers speaking Spanish or English with a German accent, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's not a very positive association. You can imagine that, of course, there's lullabies in German, right? And that they probably sound different, even if you don't have much experience of them. Anyway, what else were we able to identify in this last one?
I think this section and in the last section, everything changes when they take their blinds off.
The blindfold.
And they have they see the blindfold, yeah, and they see the person. Oh, one of them said, "Oh," and he said, "Did you imagine I would look like this?"
Okay.
Because you can kind of picture the person if you're not looking at them.
But that's partly why they have the blindfold, so that they're not misled by the appearance of the person, right? And this has to do with something that will appear later on in the video, which is profiling. You may be familiar with the idea of racial profiling, although there's also linguistic profiling, which has to do with making assumptions about what a person is like on the basis of what they look like, what they sound like, and so on and so forth, which may be totally unfair or may be totally inconsistent with the reality, right? Because the way a person looks, it was also, oh, you must be Russian because you're pretty, right? It may be positive or negative or just daft, but, this is why the blindfold is important, because it takes away those elements that are not specific to the language, right? It could be a recording, of course, but then there's the interactivity. It could be a phone message, right? It could be a phone interaction, right? But
I think it's something that we cannot avoid doing unconsciously.
Well, we can
you listen to you've got a picture. It happened to me last year when we had virtual classes, and these students who wouldn't connect their camera the whole year. So you just listened to their voices. Now I have them in second and I see them. And I remember the picture I made of them has nothing to do with the way they looked. So it's like some of them have a voice like this. And they were very big, actually, with a voice like this. Or you imagine them somehow, in some way, because of their names or their surnames, right? And then when I saw them, it's nothing to do. And there is also this stereotype of how people look like. I mean, if they say Russian, you may 2 meters high or tall and blonde hair and maybe white skin. I don't know. I'm saying because we have like an idea of how people look like depending on the place they live or they come from.
Well, this guy said that it was Egyptian, right? If that's even a language, which it's not. In Egypt, people speak Arabic, right? And, he said kind of Middle East, there's issues with geography as well, right? Middle Eastern, Egyptian.
Somehow that's so typical of American people. I mean, from people from the States, right? I don't want to stereotype them. I mean, I've seen a lot of videos in which they ask random people to name countries, and they mention continents as countries, for example.
Absolutely.
And that happens here too.
I've been asked about
here as well.
The capital of Brazil and things like that.
Of course.
Yeah. But anyway, which language did he speak? Did you get that?
Yeah.
Amharic.
Amharic.
From Ethiopia, right?
Ethiopia. Which is Amharic, right? Ethiopia, which is close to Egypt. So, not sure we would have guessed that, would we?
No.
Well,
it sounds, like when you see movies and you see terrorists taking over planes, it looked like that kind of
talking about the stereotype.
Exactly. We go from the German soldiers to the terrorists, right? This is exactly it. This is it, right? But there are millions of people who speak like that who are not terrorists. But this is what happens. This is exactly the issue.
Right? I noticed something when the girl asked him to say the numbers, 1 to 10. When he said number 7, I think was it that he said something similar to Sabbath. Could it be? And that's why I connected it with Hebrew.
Right, because then what he ends up saying is that this is a Semitic language, right? And that they're all in the same language family, which makes them separate from Indo-European languages, right? The Semitic languages include Hebrew, include Arabic, And Arabic has many different variations, okay, as well, right? In a sense, it's like Spanish or English, because there are so many different countries, and it's got such a long history of being a written language as well. Anyway, let's listen to this one.
Sentences in your language, please.
شلوني ناوم برويا حاتمة إيرا فيديوك فيلم بكين.
What about like counting 1 through 10?
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
Okay. يك دو سه چوار پنج شش حوت هشت نو ده.
Oh.
Say mom.
Daya.
Say dad.
Baba.
Say hello.
20.
Oh, I've never heard any of these.
Can you say, thank you?
زور سپاس.
Oh, fuck. I have no idea.
I've never heard any of these words before, so I'm gonna go with Indian.
Let's take your blindfold.
You kind of look Indian.
Pretty close. Kurdish.
Oh!
Do you know what it is?
I knew. Oh, I do know what
Have
Kurdish
you heard
is.
of it? You do?
I knew, yeah, no,
Oh, that's
I'm
surprising.
off free Kurdistan, for sure.
Oh wow, a lot of people don't know. Well, I'm from northern Iraq, but you can be like Armenian, Syrian, Turkish. There's even like Russians that are Kurdish
really?
people. Yeah, yeah. So because we don't have our own country, so it's kind of all over the place.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh my god.
Okay.
That guy knows everything. That Chris, it bothers me how he identifies everything.
Well, in these, you see, there's a couple more you can watch afterwards. They usually have one who's a linguist or who has some, linguistic experience, and that's why they have a bit of a spread, right? But the Free Kurdistan movement is a political solidarity movement, and that's why he's familiar with the notion of Kurdish, right? But he hadn't guessed, right, the language. So what do we notice in this one in particular?
I believe they did not have any, the participants did not have any language model to
Any clue, right?
any clue, nothing that sound familiar to them, the
Right,
movies or their.
They hadn't had exposure to it. They hadn't had exposure to anything similar. The guy who is usually quite clueless guessed Indian, which is not a language as such, but it's in the right region, right? But the interesting thing that the speaker does is she dissipates this idea of the association of a language with the nation states, right? This idea comes from where? Where do we get this idea that it's one country, one language? Because we have it too, right?
From the nation idea.
Which comes from where?
Well, we saw this.
I'm thinking.
We talked about this. We saw a video about this too.
Well, it doesn't have to do. It doesn't have. It's got to do with the French Revolution, right? The idea that there are these uniting symbols, like the national anthem, like the flag. Like, in the Middle Ages, there was no idea of nation states. There was no, one unifying force. And for that, and language was a big part of that, right? And it doesn't mean to say that in France there's no languages like, I don't know, Breton or Basque that are spoken in different regions, and that have actually been suppressed. These are regional languages, right? Or say in Spain, for example, Franco was very much against the languages of the different regions, like Catalan or Galician or Euskadi, which is Basque, Euskera. Euskera is the language and Euskadi is the person, I think. Get confused now. Anyway, Euskera.
Euskara creo que es.
Sí, no sé. Yeah, okay, you look it up. But you know what I mean. It's the Basque country, right? Anyway, so this idea that it's one language, one nation, can't be right if there are 7,000 languages and 190 countries, right?
Well, Bolivia is considered a plurinational state.
Absolutely. And that's stating explicitly the opposite idea, right?
Yes.
There's still the issue of what is an official language. Sometimes the official language is officially recognized, or you may have a de facto official language, which is the language of the state, the language that laws are published in, the language that the courts run in, the language of the education system. And that is, a tension there. Okay. So one of the things that the speaker just said is not many people know about Kurdistan and Kurdish, right? So she was surprised that the guy who knows it all knew about it, okay? So clearly different languages have different expectations in terms of being recognized. I guess the speaker of Portuguese would have been more surprised if people hadn't known what Portuguese was. It's less likely that people wouldn't know what Portuguese is. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, let's see this one, what she speaks.
Ну і що ти тут наробив мені? То що ти мені зробив, а? Тепер я маю то прибирати? Що ти мені зробив?
Oh my gosh, you're speaking a Slavic language.
Okay, how do you say I'm a dirty girl?
Я брудна дівчинка.
Romanian? Or like Ukrainian?
Polish?
You speak something from that Belarus, Ukraine, Latvia, Estonia area. Yeah, can you just tell me?
Ukrainian. So
So
you guessed it.
Yeah, kinda, yeah.
Yeah, you did guess it right.
Was it
Oh
Romanian?
It was Ukrainian.
Ukrainian?
Good job.
Can you teach me something, giggles in Ukrainian?
Yup, твою мать is fuck your mother.
Yup, твою мать?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that, I don't know if that's funny, that's kind of sad, but
Well, yup, твою мать.
Yup, твою мать.
Ciao.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. So again, the language family, the Slavic, the list of countries that we're not very sure where they go on the map, but that were part of the...
It reminds me to the film Taken.
Aha. Which one's Taken? Hang on. Because there's
The main actor is Liam Neeson.
Búsqueda Implacable.
Yes.
Okay.
It's Taken, yeah.
Okay. I was thinking of another one with the actress in the Hunger Games, the Red Sparrow.
Yep.
Which is Russian as in Russian, not Ukrainian, right? But again, I would have guessed Russian because it's so similar. But again, we get this, language family situation. Okay, let's see this guy.
Running's the best
sorry.
way to lose weight, right? That's actually
a popular
wrong.
video, that's why it has commercials.
I have no idea.
Clearly speaking some kind of African language the second time.
Why?
Because he said Hakuna Matata. Listen.
Okay. Je suis pas français.
He's French. Voulez-vous c'est avec quoi? Ce soir? I just slaughtered that.
There's 3 languages you just spoke?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hey.
At first I was gonna lean more towards maybe like a French-ish language.
Okay.
But then seeing you, I'm like, okay, but you're brown.
First one was Kinyarwanda.
Kinyarwanda?
Yeah, it's called Kinyarwanda.
Oh, where is it from?
Rwanda.
Oh, Rwanda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the second one was Swahili, which is kind of used in East Africa.
And the third one was French.
Third one was French, yeah.
Shit, that's crazy. Nice, man.
So in Rwanda, we speak like
Oh, sorry.
4 national languages. So there is French, English, Kinyarwanda, and Swahili. Like we're in the East African bloc, so we speak Swahili.
Speak your language, girl.
Anthropology.
Ah! Didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Have to find my spot again. Okay. So, just 1 second. Sorry about that. So, what about this example? We get a different situation, right?
Well, French was the one easily identified by everyone because of the exposure and probably.
But he's brown.
Yeah, that was that was kind of odd. The fact that he said it, not the fact that he's brown.
My son, when he was little and he needed to describe somebody, he's marroncito. But yeah, I mean, there's again an ethnic thing, and the blindfold was for that purpose, right? What are we talking about? We're talking about a speaker from a multilingual context, right? And what are the languages?
Swahili,
French.
Something with Rwanda at the end.
Kinyarwanda.
Kinyarwanda. Swahili, which is a lingua franca of Eastern Africa, in the sense that it's not the language that anybody speaks as a first language, but it's a language that is used to communicate across different communities in Eastern Africa. And then there's the 2 colonial languages of the area, right?
Yes.
And these are the languages that people often have as the languages of schooling, which means that people going to school are often schooled in languages that are not their first language, because there may be so many different community languages, which you can imagine the complexity of that, right? Because they're having to learn a language to be schooled in it without it being their first language, and they speak different languages.
A language they would only use in school, right?
Mostly,
Most
but
probably.
then there's what we're looking at is people who now live in the States, because this was done in the States, clearly, right? And they may be the children of immigrants, so they may be first generation American. We'll see that more clearly in one that is coming up, not the next one, but the following one. But you see, as we move away from Europe, and we're getting more and more multilingual, right? Okay, let's have a look at this one.
Speak Swahili.
Speak your language, girl.
Nông Hồ va.
Asian. Go ahead.
Nông về Chakula va.
Definitely Asian.
Nông Hồ, 我名字是 Kellen. 我现在来讲上海话，是来中国里向，葛么侬应该听不懂是啥地方来中国里向。
She sounds like my nail tech, so I'm gonna go with Korean. Not to be racist. Are you Korean? Shit.
That's not Mandarin.
It's
That's
not
not
Mandarin, but that's not
yeah,
Mandarin.
and that's not Cantonese. Like I didn't recognize that.
Yeah, it's Shanghainese.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that it's even like a dialect, but it's spoken in like Shanghai.
Oh, okay. That's crazy.
Yeah, the language is kind of like fading because a lot of the younger people aren't speaking it anymore. Like for a while, you couldn't speak it in school. Like it wasn't allowed for you to speak it with your friends at school because they wanted you to speak Mandarin because that's what like the global language all over China is. Like my grandparents, my parents, they all speak it. But then whenever they address the younger kids, like they just switch to Mandarin. And like they're usually always really surprised that I can understand and speak Shanghainese. Now I want to like teach my kids Shanghainese too, just to keep it alive.
Keep it going.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm learning all these new languages I didn't even know. So this is dope. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I appreciate it.
Zewe.
Zewe.
Yeah.
Zewe. Hey.
Okay, so you remember when we saw the intergenerational transmission scale? This is what she's talking about, right? She's personally concerned that this language is disappearing, fading. And her grandparents, her parents speak it, but they don't use it with the younger generation. But she has learned it and she wants her children to speak it. Right?
I laughed when he thought that he won by saying Korean, and then when he saw her, said, "Okay, yes, I won, but are you Korean?" No. That was so
and the reason he thought it was
because
Korean,
he sounds like his tech.
Nail tech.
Nail tech.
Yeah.
Like
nail tech, la manicurista.
Manicura.
Manicurista, no sé. Bueno, whatever. The person who does his nails. En fin. Manto de piedad. Let's see the last one because this is an interesting one too.
Kirinam! Saan ka nang galing? Bakit ngayon ka lang nakauwi? Sino naman kasama mo? Did you do your homework?
Hello.
Kumusta?
Oh, ¿cómo está? Muy bien, ¿y tú, señorita?
Anong sinabi mo?
Oh, no, that's not. She came out with ¿cómo está? But I don't know that second line. What'd you say that second line?
Anong sinabi mo?
Not familiar.
Kumusta ka?
This is too easy.
Yeah.
She just said hi to me. Like, hi, how are you?
She's some type of like Asian mixed with like an island. Cause she has like a lot of Latino, like in Spanish derivatives, but like she's definitely Asian.
Getting warm.
Guam? What is it?
Tagalog.
What is that?
Philippines. From the
Philippines, which is literally like Asian but Latino.
Hello.
How'd you learn?
Well, no, I am Filipino. People don't think that though, huh?
Okay.
Yeah. I learned English more than I did Tagalog.
Can I ask you like why you think your parents didn't like teach you it or you weren't taught it?
Cause walang hiya. They're shameful. Just kidding. Hopefully they don't get offended by that.
I think it's a very real thing.
Yeah. Because I think the thought process is that in order to succeed, you're gonna have to speak the language of the majority.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of our parents come here and they're like, they've worked so hard to get here and they've sacrificed so much and they just want the best for their children. And it's coming from that kind of love. But I mean, it doesn't always pan out for like the best for the child as far as their identity, cultural identity.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, we get the issue of intergenerational transmission, whether it exists or not, and now we maybe a language that we hadn't heard before, but that has all these other influences, right? By virtue of being spoken on an island that was invaded, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, let's just see the roundup of this, and then I'll let you go.
Thanks.
How's this experience for you?
It was fun. It was really fun because now I have all these other languages that I want to learn.
Yeah, I definitely would want to get some lessons from Sunshine, who speaks Tagalog. Yeah, so yeah.
I think it was really cool to learn how interconnected languages are. There was a lot of similarities between a lot of different languages, and once you look at the history in it, it makes sense. So I think that's pretty dope.
No, I felt really guilty about like trying to guess where people's languages come from, doing the linguistic profiling thing.
Why?
Well, I know like everyone here volunteered for it, and it's all fun and games, but like I don't know, there are real consequences out in the world when people try to profile using language, the kinds of assumptions people make.
Go learn language, bitch.
Okay, so any general comments, observations on what we just saw?
I like what the last guy says at the end about the dangers of profiling.
Oh, I thought
you were going to
say bitch.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that.
No, the one before last.
Okay, girl, you.
Anyway, well, as you can see, this is a kind of these guys do this kind of experiment on all sorts of other subjects, and they do it kind of entertaining, kind of funny, but there's a lot of interesting things behind it that you can work out from what they say. You've got a couple more that you can watch if you want later on and see what conclusions you draw from that one. There's an inversion of roles because the girl who speaks Flemish will guess in the next one, and you get an inversion of roles like that, which is kind of interesting as well, right? So well, I suggest you do that. Watch this and finish your language autobiographies if you haven't finished them, or whatever. And I'll see you on the 9th at 2:10 for Denise's presentation. See, there's so much build-up.
Yes, that's what I told her. I said, "You're creating this suspense, girl." It's like,
yeah, we shouldn't put too much pressure on it because she's going to.
Yeah, she may collapse.
Run for the mountains. We don't want to do that because we wanted to do it. So let's be supportive and be there. Okay, guys. Well, have a nice weekend. Have a nice week.
Likewise.
And,
thank you.
And see you next time.
Thank you, Cristina. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.